why all the lying about this, and what do you think is actually going on?
Well, I can tell you they're categorically lying. They're misleading people, okay? The fact that a balloon, these balloons that the Chinese have been innovating for a while, they've used them a couple times to circumvent the globe and the like. There were pictures posted on Twitter about it, but they have never, ever crossed the entire continental United States, flying over places like where Strategic Command is based. These balloons, look, a couple things people are wondering about. Number one, in that space between where satellites operate and where a spy plane could operate, in that zone, these things become very useful, especially if you have a lot of them, which is what it seems like the Chinese are trying to innovate. What do they have on them? The ability to take in real-time video, high-resolution photographs, potentially as well capture electronic communications. And they can loiter. That's the advantage. It's cheap. You're not looking for them because they move very slowly. And they can loiter over a period of time. So imagine in the middle of a war, one of these things in the Pacific, being able to take real-time footage, real-time, and feed it back of what's going on the ground and what's going on in the sea and so forth. So, but the notion that somehow this has been happening all along, it's just not true. I mean, because people were spotting this thing with a naked eye. I mean, they were seeing it, they were calling in, they had to warn people in South Carolina not to try to shoot them down on their own, because they were visible to people. They're just being dishonest with no reason. Well, the reason being is I think that they were caught off guard and did not respond appropriately, and now they're scrambling for answers and to deflect blame.
I mean, the Pentagon shouldn't be lying to us, right? I mean, a lot of Americans, I put myself in this category, always admired the U.S. military, but if they become a political instrument for an administration, and they seem like they are, some of their leaders are, I mean, that seems like a disfigurement of the military, and it's very discouraging to watch.
Well, and it's also, in many cases, as you've already pointed out, these unnamed sources that go off the record and leak out these little pieces of information. So we don't know if they're political appointees or civilians or someone just trying to climb up the chain of command and be promoted. But at the end of the day, we're losing focus on the fundamental issue here, and that is that the Chinese continue to develop and innovate new capabilities, including ones that appear really rudimentary and pretty simplistic, but actually could be proven to be quite effective. But the most important point is they felt bold enough to fly this thing, entering over Idaho, through Montana, the Midwest of the United States. I mean, literally cut a diagonal path right across the middle of the continental U.S. That's never happened before. And then, obviously exiting off the East Coast, and felt like they didn't have anything to fear about it. And it was, in many ways, in my view, it was sending a message for the world. And that is, look, we can fly these things over airspace of the United States, and they can't and won't do anything about it. So what makes you think they're going to do anything anywhere in the world? They're a hollow superpower. That's the Chinese argument. That's the point they're making tonight to the world.
It does seem like an obvious dominance move. So the Biden administration was saying, well, we only had a very narrow window to shoot it down off the coast of South Carolina because then it would drift in international waters, at which point we were bound by something called international law. I mean, the Chinese broke the law by flying it over our country. So why would the Biden administration be caught up in the minutia of international law, which is kind of a meaningless concept? Why wouldn't they shoot down where they felt like it? It's our country.
Well, that's a great question, and one they should answer. I mean, the trajectory of it was pretty clear by early to late last week to early last week to late the week before. You could tell the trajectory that it was coming. They were tracking it. They knew it actually went over Canada for a brief period of time as well. And that's also NORAD territory. So they had multiple options to bring it down. Look, I'm not saying detonate this thing over a major U.S. city or a populated area. This thing's the size of 3, city buses. That lands in the wrong place, it's going to hurt people. But they had other options to bring it down. And by the way, the Chinese could have also moved this thing. They didn't feel like they needed to. This thing probably has a self-destruct mechanism on it that allows it to self-destruct if necessary. They didn't feel any need to do that. So ultimately, I think that this, to me, is just one more example of, hopefully, look, it's a balloon, but I hope it wakes people up to the fact that we are now engaged, if the people don't realize it already, in a full-scale geopolitical competition with the Chinese, and they're playing to win, and we're over here messing around with a lot of silly stuff and back talk that isn't addressing the fundamental issue of the 21st century.